We're so grateful that you can join us for this event. We are absolutely thrilled to have the Attorney General of the Commonwealth, Maura Healey, here to be able to address a room full of students and faculty and staff and community members. We just finished a tour with AG Healey and showed her a little bit about the campus and the great work here, and had a chance to talk with some of our students. I did want to also note we've got two dignitaries here. One is our Mayor of Holyoke, Alex Morse. And we're also fortunate to have our Chair of our Board of Trustees, Bob Gilbert, here. So we're going to get this program started. So what I'd like to do is I would like to introduce to you Alex Sanchez, who is our Professor and Chair of Criminal Justice Program. And we're fortunate to be, criminal justice is one of our top majors at this institution. And so we have a very vibrant program out here. I think there will be a lot of topics of interest, not just for criminal justice, but for our business students and our healthcare students as well, and several other majors where the work that she does overlaps the types of topics that you're studying in your courses. But what I'm going to do is turn it over to Professor Sanchez to do the introduction of A.G. Healey.
Can everyone hear me? Okay. So thank you and welcome this afternoon for being here. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, my background, I am a criminal justice professor. My background is in policing. I spent 17 years with the Springfield Police Department and then transferred over to Sunderland and Hatfield, where I did an additional 4 years. In my time in policing, I was fortunate enough to work in the Detective Bureau, community policing, and all of that knowledge and experience has helped me become what I think a decent professor here at college. I enjoy teaching, and a lot of the things and a lot of the questions that will be presented today are topics that we discuss in the classroom all of the time, and hopefully we can get some insight as to where we're going and how we can address these issues. Okay? And how it'll work is I'll introduce the Attorney General. She will speak for a few, and then we have some questions for her. And then after all of that, we'll open it up in case anyone else has questions. Okay? Are we good? All right, so Maura Healey is serving her second term as Massachusetts Attorney General, leading the People's Law Firm as the People's Lawyer, continuing a career spent fighting for justice and equal rights. After Maura's historic victory in her first ever run for office, she has spent her time in office working on the issues that matter to the people of the Commonwealth, from confronting the devastating opioid epidemic to reducing health care and energy costs, protecting consumers, ensuring equality for all, and keeping our community safer. For 7 years prior to her election, Maura helped lead the Attorney General's office, ultimately overseeing more than half of the office's 600 employees. Earlier in her career, Maura was a prosecutor in Middlesex County and a litigator partner at Wilmer Hale. After college, and I don't know if she's going to want me to say this, but after college, she also spent 2 years as a 5'4" starting point guard on a professional basketball team in Europe.
Okay, thank you. I'm short. Now I'm starting to shrink, so I really have to stand up. I look forward to your questions this afternoon, but I do want to take the opportunity to thank Professor Sanchez, to thank President Royal, and also Chairman Bob Gilbert for the invitation to be here today. I'm honored to be joined by my friend, Mayor Alex Morse, And it's just great to be here. I was just on a tour of this great school, and I'm really, really happy to have been able to spend some time. I was really impressed when we moved down and we visited the Thrive office. I think it's so important that we do everything we can to find ways to support students inside and outside of the classroom. And Rosemary, thank you to you and the team for the work that you're doing. I just stopped by Professor Knapp's microbiology class, and that was really cool to see the new clean lab and everything that's going on here. I'm glad the state has invested money here in the school. We need to continue to support those investments and grow those investments. And I just want to say this is a region that means a lot to me. I remember campaigning with Alex back in 2014 when I first ran for office, and I really began my campaign here in Northampton, actually not too far away, and I really, really came to appreciate, even though, don't hold it against me, I live in Boston, and I grew up in New Hampshire, and my family's really from the North Shore, in Massachusetts. I love this region. I also recognize this region, too, has its interesting elements and challenges, too, in terms of more difficulty in getting around and more difficulty in housing. There are fewer work opportunities in terms of the diversity of work opportunities compared to some other parts of the state. But this is a region with tremendous opportunity before it and possibility. And so whatever I can do as your Attorney General now, I want to be there in support. I'm proud to have an office here in Springfield, not too far away, led by Amy Karanjikis. And I say that because I want you guys to know what your office is. And I say your office because it is your office. Ultimately, my job is to be the people's lawyer. So if your civil rights get violated, if you're the victim of a hate crime, if somebody discriminates against you based on your race or your religion or your sexual orientation, come to my office. If you've got a loan servicer out there or a debt collector that's hounding you or harassing your family, come to my office. We bring actions against those bad actors. My job is to make sure we're enforcing laws that protect the environment, protect your safety out at a workplace, make sure your employer actually pays you, it doesn't try to stiff you. These are laws that are on the books. It's my job and my office's job to enforce those laws. But we can only do that if we know about what's happening. My focus the last 4 years has been on a number of fronts, and some of them were named by Professor Sanchez. I'd say top of the list has been confronting the opioid crisis. Maybe we'll talk more about our suit against Purdue and the Sacco family, but the work we're doing generally in this area to get after issues of substance use disorder and ignored behavioral health needs in communities and families all across the state and country. I think we've also put a heavy focus on protecting consumers and finding ways to stand up to protect the interests of consumers, making sure that Facebook and other entities out there are not out there abusing and misusing your own personal information. Making sure that companies aren't unfairly charging you or taking advantage of you. I spent a lot of time on student issues. One of the very first cases I remember I got involved in as public protection chief was when ACI in Springfield closed its doors overnight. And students were left high and dry with boatloads of debt, because a lot of them made the mistake of not going to HCC. And we're lured in, and say, sign the dotted line, we're going to give you a loan, and don't worry about it. It'll take care of itself. And of course, what ended up happening is these students were going there. They didn't get the degrees that they were promised. A lot of these students, too, were veterans and eligible for GI Bill money. I had early experience going after for-profit schools and then going after predatory student loan companies and servicers. So much so that one of the first things I did as Attorney General was set up a student loan assistance unit in my office. So students in default or in trouble, call my office, and I'll try to help renegotiate loans and the like. We've also focused on public safety, and that's taken a bunch of different forms, from trying to combat domestic violence, to working in our schools, to teaching people, young people, the signs of stalking behavior, of harassment, of bullying, and giving them the tools to take that on. I've focused on human trafficking and combating that scourge, and certainly violence, gun violence in particular, and that's led to the enforcement of strong gun laws here in the state. And it's also been an interesting time too, standing up for civil rights and the Constitution. And what we're supposed to hold dear as Americans. And that's led us to court a number of times, including actions against the Trump administration on a number of fronts. The efforts to go after DACA students and immigrants more generally, and undermine and roll back any number of protections that have been put in place to protect workers and the environment, fairness in the marketplace and the like. So we're a busy office, but we're your office, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you guys today. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a series of questions, and my first question, and the Attorney General has already touched on it a little bit, but we'd like to hear some more, is can you please tell us the status of the suit against Purdue Pharma and your expectations of its outcome? What can we do in our communities to address this issue?
So the opioid crisis. When I started, we decided that we needed to come at this from a bunch of fronts. So we were the first to make Narcan available to all first responders in any state. My office reached out to the manufacturer, negotiated a lower price, and Narcan started to be distributed across the state. We also worked to improve more access to treatment. It's still a need, I know, it's great everywhere across the state, but I've long advocated for that. We went after doctors who were prescribing crazy amounts of pain meds that were ending up, of course, in the black market, illegally diverted. We shut down those practices. We worked with our Massachusetts Medical Society to actually change the laws around prescribing of opioid medication, because at the time, to go back to 2013, 2014, we were noticing that a lot of our heroin users then had started with pills. Now is not the case. You see people going straight to fentanyl, but at the time, I remember touring in Holyoke with Mayor Morris, wonderful treatment facilities and the community health center there, listening to the stories of how people became addicted. So we got really aggressive really soon. We've worked to lower overdose rates here in the state. We certainly have a long way to go. I continue to put resources working with state and local and federal police on drug trafficking, clamping down and getting after those who are out there pumping heroin and now fentanyl into our communities. I secured $3 million from our U.S. Justice Department to help fund police overtime to do those cases and get up on wires and the like. But one thing is clear to me. One, we need to do everything we can to invest in prevention and education. I spend a lot of time in middle schools, and we've supported and actually produced, made available for free to all public middle schools in the state, a really cool program that I designed with Chris Herron, who was a great basketball player, but ultimately suffered from addiction and then recovered. And he's just a terrific, inspiring speaker. We worked with a health organization, and we developed a model that is now to supplement curriculum for health and wellness and substance use disorder education in public middle schools. We need to stop addiction before it sets in, and we need to do as much as we can to get information to our young people. But the final thing that I'm very, very clear about, having spent time with so many grandparents who are raising grandkids right now, so many moms and dads who've lost sons and daughters, brothers and sisters who've lost parents and siblings. We need accountability, and we need the story to be told. And what happened back in 1998 is there was this company called Purdue that brought Oxy to market. And they also went to Congress, and they said to Congress, hey, you got to change the rules here, because we want to sell as much of the stuff as possible. How do you do that? You create something like a pain scale. Now when we go to doctors, right, we're asked, where are you on 0 to 10? That never existed before, but it became part of the rules and regulations. And there were all sorts of things that companies like Purdue did to enable it to sell as many of their opioid products as possible. What we've learned, of course, over time is that as sales of opioid products went up, overdose numbers went up, and eventually heroin numbers went up, and deaths went up. And that's why you see the devastation all across our state and all across our country. My office has led a multi-state investigation into the 6 manufacturers and distributors of opioids. We're currently in the middle of those litigations, but probably the most critical decision we made was to sue not just Purdue, but also the Sackler family. The Sackler family is the family that controls and owns this privately held company that has reaped billions and billions of dollars as a result of the sales of its products. And you know what Purdue did? Purdue, some of you have kids, you tell them they do something bad, like don't do it again, or they do something bad. So this is a company in 2007 paid a $600 million fine for the illegal and unfair marketing of their opioid products. 2 of their executives pled guilty. You know what they did after that? They proceeded to make 150,000 more doctor's visits to Massachusetts offices alone. They sold over $500 million worth of Purdue opioid products here in the state. And you guys know the numbers, because I asked for a show of hands. Everybody in this room knows someone touched by this crisis. And so our lawyers, your lawyers, went through millions of pages of documents, and we made the case that not only was the company at fault, but its officers and directors, specifically the Sackler family members, were intimately involved in the design of this marketing scheme. It got so bad that even in 2014, you know what they decided to do? They were going to make money on the other end of the market too. They were going to get into the market of treatment for opioid addiction. Right? So that's corporate greed. That's why you have an Attorney General's office, and that's why I have said that this to me is about bringing the facts to light, and we will continue to pursue this aggressively in court, recovering as much as we can, but you can't even begin to tell the tale. In 2017, the opioid crisis is estimated to have cost in 1 year the state of Massachusetts $15 billion alone. So you can never recover, and you can never put a price, frankly, on a life lost. But we're going to continue to be aggressive, and that's where things stand. It's currently in litigation right now, and we're just going to continue to fight for it.
This, as you heard the Attorney General talk about, I mean, this is the type of issue, opioid addiction, that really levels the community. And so our role as a provider of educational services, we received a $400,000 grant from the Department of Resources and Services in Administration to be able to focus on helping work with our partners so that we can start to identify the educational needs that folks, the providers, and eventually nurses and doctors and so forth need to have an understanding about this addiction to be able to treat it. So our community health workers, HCC is the first area college in this particular region to create a community health worker certificate. And the purpose of those community health worker roles is for people to be able to identify those that are at risk, understand what the treatment options are, get them into treatment, but then also try to work with the providers to figure out how we can start to be more proactive so that we're not just dealing with the reactive effects of addiction, but to try to get ahead of this. But it is a big issue that is affecting our communities. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that our EMT training program too, that we've added training so that they know how to respond to addiction, and that they also, our staff in our Jumpstart program, know how to administer naloxone and be able to do those treatments. So, you know, it's a combination of focusing on, you know, how are we able to react to this crisis that has seemed to balloon, you know, in recent years in our communities, but then how are we able to proactively start chipping away at the bigger problem?
Thank you. If I may add too, in taking and collaborating with chiefs of police and different departments in our area, it came to my attention that there are local departments around here who actually patrol the areas with healthcare workers and counselors and target those areas where they think this problem exists to give assistance to those folks if they need it, which I thought was really proactive. And on the flip side, Monday I was at the Hampshire County House of Corrections, and they've started to implement the treatment for the opioid addiction, which is Suboxone. So they're continuing to administer that treatment for offenders. So while they're in there, that component of what's triggering their behavior is taken care of and they can focus on the other issues. All right. So, next question. Please describe the steps you've taken to address gun violence and what else is needed to prevent it.
You know, every day 100 people will be killed by a gun in this country. 62% of those deaths are suicide, and that's an issue. Another 200 more will be injured as a result of gun violence. And you think about the ripple effect of any one of those shootings on that individual, prisoner family, the community, the neighborhood, and the like. So what have I done? I've enforced laws that are here on the books. Massachusetts has a number of strong laws on the books. And I want to be clear, I respect the Second Amendment. My job as your Attorney General is to follow the law, and we do that. But respecting the Second Amendment, say, also allows for the enforcement of laws that are there for public health and public safety. And that's what our United States Supreme Court has said as well. What are those laws in Massachusetts? We've got a law in Massachusetts that says you can't get a license to carry, you can't get a permit to have a gun unless your local police chief says okay. That makes a lot of sense to me, because it's actually your local police department that's going to know how many calls there have been to the house for domestic violence incidents and other incidents and the like. That is something that the NRA and the gun lobby challenged. We successfully defended. We have laws around storage. We have laws around the kinds of guns that you have access to. We've had any number of challenges, including challenges to the enforcement of our state assault weapons ban, which it came to my attention back in 2015 that assault weapons were being sold here in the state, even though the legislature and the governor had signed a law banning the sale of those weapons. We sent out a notice to everybody, including gun dealers, reminding them about the law. I never had to make any arrests for violation of the law, but it became clear that we were going to enforce the law, and sales of assault weapons have effectively ended here in the state. That was challenged, and just last week, another court once again affirmed that we were right and acting within our constitutional bounds. I think that another big point is around prevention. You know, we teamed up recently with Sandy Hook Promise, an organization formed after the terrible and devastating shooting in Newtown. It was formed, and they are working to bring with me a program that will go out to over 140,000 students in Massachusetts that's going to teach students and teachers how to identify the signs of someone who is troubled, who's experiencing difficulty, maybe has tendencies that raise concerns about whether this person might commit an act of violence, and then help, reach out with the tools to help that person. So I think that's really important. So we've got to find ways to deal with this as a public health issue, to educate, to support, to teach nonviolent ways. I'm a big proponent. Some of you see me, I am out playing basketball in places. We got to keep gyms open. We got to keep programming open after school, into the night, over the weekend. We've got to find ways to support communities. And we've got to find ways to enforce laws that are on the books, which I'll continue to do. I also have been a proponent of reforms at the national level, like background checks. If we just had some basic background checks, that would help. 60% of the guns that turn up in crimes in Massachusetts come from New Hampshire, Vermont, southern states, where it's much easier to get a gun, and those guns are illegally trafficked here into Massachusetts. It's pretty hard for us to stop as a matter of law enforcement, so we need some basic reforms that way. So that's the kind of work that we're doing. Obviously, there's more work to be done. We continue to see shootings nationally, and mass shootings, every week it seems, and we can do much better as a society.
Yeah, this is something really into mostly the last decade or 15 years. Community colleges and universities were never really thinking about specific to on-campuses, and then Columbine happened, and they just continued to escalate. In fact, there was just one yesterday in a campus shooting in University of North Carolina. And so this is becoming a reality. What we're trying to do at HCC is really try to focus on how we can ensure that we create the safest environment possible here, and that we can educate people on procedures if there is an emergency. It's a balance because we have an open campus. And so anybody can walk on campus at any time, And that's the beauty of it, right? We're a community college. We exist to support and serve the community, but then it also creates other vulnerabilities. And so, you know, I think part of what we have to really try to look at is, you know, what's happening in our society that's leading to more of the gun violence, and you know, how can we start to address some of the core issues that are a result of these unfortunate events that were happening.
All right, thank you. Just because I'm always going to add something. On the law enforcement side, I can tell you that Springfield, it has a program called ShotSpotter. ShotSpotter is a program in I would say, high crime areas where if a gun is used and the technique or the piece of equipment can distinguish between a shot fired versus a fireworks versus a trash can or anything like that. And police response is very quick. And even a lot of times folks don't actually call the police department because for them it's something common, but police response is always there for that sake. And then as President Royal just mentioned, here on campus we have been working to make sure that everyone on campus has a good experience. We've been working for many years on an emergency response committee addressing numerous things that will make us a safe campus because, like President Moyer said, it is an open campus, and you know we have travelers, vehicles as well as walkers, and on any given day we have plenty of visitors on campus just walking around. So, thank you. The next question is, what key flaws in the criminal justice system do you most want to address, and how can our system be improved?
Well, I think that in Massachusetts, we did have a significant law that went into effect just this last year, a criminal justice reform law that did a number of things to make the system fair, to address some of the disparities, and ultimately to make a system that's going to be more effective. And there's still much work to be done in this space. I don't have to tell any of you who are CJ majors here at the college, but a few things did happen. I remember hearing a story, back a few years ago from a young guy who I met who had lost his license automatically as a result of his pleading guilty to marijuana possession. It might have been a plot, but as a result of that, he lost his license. And when he was looking, he had just come off probation, and he's trying to get a job, and he can't get a job because he can't get to a job because he doesn't have a license, and he didn't even have the money to go get the license because he didn't have a job. And he also had a little brother who was going to try to help take to school, and a grandmother who needed to go to doctor's appointments, and it just didn't work. And it was one of the examples of something that had to change. Recent reform, the law got rid of that automatic suspension, and it may seem like a small thing, but it's meaningful. There were changes to the way bail is handled, and now has to be assessed on somebody's ability to pay, because you shouldn't be sitting in jail just because you're poor. We raised the limit for a felony charge from $250 to $1,000, which I think was important. There were waivers for certain, what used to be fees in the criminal process, and there were some waivers of those fees. There were steps taken to incent and create more diversion programs to keep people out of jail in the first place, especially young people. So many of the people who are getting arraigned in district court this morning are there because of issues related to mental health and substance use disorder. So what are the things that we need to be doing within the system to address the root causes of violence or crime and of crime in our communities? And those are just some of the examples. There's a lot more work that needs to be done. I think the study around unconscious bias is incredibly important in what's happened. One of the first things I did as Attorney General, I required unconscious bias training for every member of our office. Police, investigators, attorneys, paralegals, everybody had to go through this. And it's constant work, but it is part of making our system more fair and eliminating some of the disparities. We've got a long ways to go, but I think there's an appetite now nationally. I think people are more attuned to racial injustice, socioeconomic injustice, and also the fact that we're paying boatloads of money to an institution and to services that have become largely privatized in many parts of the country. There are corporate interests that are making boatloads of money off of bail and off of keeping people incarcerated. And it's not really serving public safety. It's not making our communities safer. I always say that the people who are in jail, the people who are in prison, save for some relatively small segment, are going to get out. They are going to be your neighbor. They are going to go to, their kids are going to go to school with your kids. We have every interest as a society in making people whole and rehabilitating people as they pay their debt to society. And that's where my office is going to continue to be on that issue.
When you look at rehabilitation, one of the most effective ways to address that issue is, and to reduce recidivism, is through education. And so we've partnered with the Hampden County Sheriff's Department in creating a 14-week program in culinary arts to help students who are in the pre-release program. And what's great about this program is, first of all, as H.E. Healey said, I mean, they at some point are going to get out. And so if they get out and they have the same level of knowledge and awareness, then that doesn't bode well in terms of helping to think differently about future career paths and future decisions that they make. So giving them tools, skills, and knowledge to be able then to develop a good future for themselves. So they start off 7 weeks in the pre-release facility, Ludlow, the men's facility, and Chicopee, the women's facility. And then the second 7 weeks of the program, they actually spend at our HCC MGM Culinary Arts Institute in downtown Holyoke. And this is giving them tools to change, and I've been to the graduations, are very powerful, but they have a future that they can look forward to and something that they can work to build. And our employers have been great in being able to give them an opportunity to reinvent themselves because they've committed to changing. And so programs like that are very helpful. For the individuals that are released from custody, we have a 75% placement rate. So
That's great. That's great.
I might as well just plug in our program. Here at the college, our criminal justice students, we have a wide range of things that we offer them. I tour the local jails in Hampshire County and the Hampden County jails with our students, just to give them a better perspective on different jobs that they may want to do in criminal justice, because it's not all about law enforcement and policing. Part of our police society class, we have students visit community policing program in Springfield, the C3 police program, where the Springfield police and the state police team up, and they address local issues that aren't necessarily emergency related, but quality of life issues, like the drug activity, the drug use in certain neighborhoods, things like that, things that affect the neighborhood. And so we provide these programs for our students. We also have partnerships with UMass, with the cadet program. Springfield has a cadet program, and we're lucky enough that we started a cadet program here at the college where we have criminal justice students working with our police department and developing some basic skills so that if this is what they want to do and go into that career, they can choose to do so. Okay. All right, at this point, are there any questions from the audience? So if you could step up to the microphone that I will give you.
So I have a question. What would you say to people who believe that executives cannot be jailed and that their position in society makes it so that they are kind of proof from that? And what would you say would be the response that we as a society should have for that?
Well, executives can absolutely be jailed. They need to be charged, and decisions are made about whether to bring a case against somebody criminally or civilly, we call it, right? And sometimes, there's a calculus that's done. There are certain things that you can get as a result of a criminal conviction, and there are other things that you can't get. And, right now, for example, my office has made the decision to go after the Sacklers, the executives and directors, civilly. They went after them, some of them criminally years ago. You saw how that worked out. They just paid a fine and pled guilty and then continued on their merry way. What I'm seeking as part of the civil action right now is reform of practices and policies. There are certain things that you can only get. Sometimes you can shut down a business entirely through a civil action, and you can also recover money for the damage caused. So I think, that's some of the thinking that goes on. I understand why people are really upset that more executives didn't go to jail, weren't criminally charged with financial fraud and everything that brought about the subprime crisis years ago, and the foreclosure crisis, the housing crisis, and the like. And, I'm in the camp that, you go where the facts take you, but absolutely there's something very important about the threat of criminal liability. Now, too, that proving something criminally beyond a reasonable doubt is a higher standard, is a harder standard of burden of proof. And so some of that big factors into these things. But it is absolutely the case that executives, white-collar, so-called white-collar folks can go to jail. And, that's one of the things that I find galling as Attorney General. We have a lot of people who, may be getting arraigned in district court on any given morning for particular charges, but I see the fraud and abuse systemically brought by corporate institutions and the damage done and the growing disparity across our country and the growing inequalities and the abuse within what is supposed to be a fair marketplace. And that's something, we need to be vigilant about. So I respect the question.
Hi, I'm Tracy Whitfield. I wanted to show you our picture because I've supported you since the beginning.
Well, thank you.
And I think you do great work.
Was that in Springfield?
That was in Springfield.
Yeah, at the library?
At the library,
Yeah.
So you remember too. So I wanted to say thank you for all that you've done since you've been in office, but specifically for the investigation that you did on the police department with the Nathan Bills case and how your office handled that. I appreciate that. I want to know, so war on drugs targeted Black and Latino communities, specifically with marijuana. And so a lot of folks got arrested during that time. And even though it's legalized in Massachusetts and even some of the retail shops are coming in Springfield, there will still be Black market sales. And so do you think that certain officers will still target a certain population? And how do you plan to deal with that?
Well, Tracy, I think it's a great question because certainly we've seen evidence so far that in states where marijuana has been legalized, there still continues to be significant Black market activity. It's going to be up to each area, police department, district attorney's office to determine that. I will tell you from where I sit right now, I think we've got our hands full combating fentanyl right now. That's really the dominant devastating drug across communities. Heroin. It's not to say we're not seeing marijuana. We are, and if we're seeing it trafficked in illegal amounts, we're going to pursue that because that's very different from what legalization allows. We see some cocaine, so we've got to be out there on these things. But for me, at least, it's always about putting your resources towards where the biggest problems are, and what is really affecting and hurting your community. Part of the problem we've got to curb, though, with the Black market. Part of how legalization was sold here was as a tax revenue, machine, right? We're supposed to benefit from all that. So it's important that we make sure that that's tight, that we're actually benefiting from that as a state. Good question.
Well, can I just add, the Criminal Justice Reform Act has also stated that a lot of these drugs, they would be either eliminated or reduced to minimum mandatory offenses for these types of crimes.
That's another important part of something we were supported in the Criminal Justice Reform bill, was the elimination of certain mandatory minimums.
Hello. My name is Lee. I'm a former community crisis worker to deal with the Department of Mental Health to see if their mental health rights are being violated. And we want to help these people. We absolutely want to get them to treatment. We want to start counseling. We want to get them on medication if they need it, but there's no resources. So what is your plan to bring more resources to Massachusetts?
Well, unfortunately, I don't control the dollars and the purse strings here. That's something for the legislature to do, or for a governor to propose. I will tell you, I think it's foolish. We need, part of the problem, I'm so glad to hear you're in nursing. I have a lot of regard and respect for nurses. I come from a family of nurses, actually. But I think there are a couple things that have happened. For way too long, what we've done is we've paid healthcare professionals who took care of medical surgical needs, physical needs we'll call them, a lot more. We reimbursed them a lot more than we did those who were providing behavioral health resources. And that led to, naturally, fewer people signing up to become behavioral health specialists because you can make more money over here. We have a similar problem right now with a lower number of primary care doctors across the United States, where we may have more people going into dermatology specialties because you make more. So that's a problem. We just haven't had the supply of providers and resources. And I don't think we've ever had a recognition that this needs to be an investment, because everything we deal with now is on the back end. You could head off so much if you actually took the time to make sure that every classroom had access to behavioral health specialists and care, that every kid had that kind of attention from early on. When I go to Fitchburg and I hear there's a 6-month waiting list right now for kids to see behavioral health specialists referred to the school, that's a huge problem. Imagine 6 months in the life of a child. So all I can tell you is that I'm a big advocate for allocating resources that way. It's why we're working hard to defend, for example, our Medicaid program when the Trump administration threatened to cut that off. Because if you take away Medicaid, you take away a lot of access to people's, it may not be the best or only option out there, but it's an option. You don't take it away from people. We're defending the Affordable Care Act for the same reason. But we just need, I think, culturally, systemically, as a society, this isn't just a state issue, way more investment in behavioral health services, and certainly in terms of treatment. I know, treatment, particularly treatment for opioid addiction, you've got somebody with a heroin problem, that is a not weeks-long problem, that is a years-long problem, where people also need housing, they need a stable situation, and we just don't have the infrastructure built in. And particularly as you move, to certain parts of the state where it's a lot harder, too, for people to get around and be able to access, access care. So I appreciate the question.
Okay, so we have time for one more question.
I'll be quick. I'll do a couple more. Anything else you guys care about? Yeah?
I'm going to ask about Muslim ban.
Yep.
So when the president introduced Muslim ban, a lot of people, for example, I'm Muslim.
Yep.
So a lot of people would like, let's say, ask me, like, what do you think about that? Or how is your family and all that?
Mm-hmm.
So the installation of fear that is used by the president, I would say, affects a lot of people. And all that, and just today it's still being a big problem, even though it's not everything that's going on right now. But a lot of people have that fear of what can I do, what can I not do. So what I'm asking is, what do you think would be the solution to this?
I'm glad you raised this as a point. We spent a ton of time. My office has spent a ton of time the last couple of years on issues related to immigration and to some of the rise that we've seen in bigotry and prejudice and discrimination and really unhealthy rhetoric that we've seen, particularly from the president and his administration. I was at Logan Airport in Boston the day that the travel ban went into effect, and I will tell you what happened that day. There was no notice given to our United States Customs and Border Patrol personnel at the airport that this was even happening. It was complete and total chaos. And meanwhile, what you had in terms of a situation where people rushing to the airport to protest, to take a stand, just weeks after that shooting at the Fort Lauderdale airport. You had people who were literally being held behind the gate. Professors at University of Massachusetts institutions who are teaching engineering here in our state, 2 students who had been for the last 10 years, who weren't able to get through the gate. You had family members and loved ones scared about what was happening. I had to call. This is how chaotic it was what our federal government did. I had to call our own U.S. Attorney's Office that Saturday night to tell them that we were going to bring suit to stop this travel ban. They didn't even know that this was happening. We were able to get into court with lawyers, and we actually got an order that night stopping the ban. And as you know, this was the subject of litigation. But, you know, we then saw the actions taken to end the DACA program. You can say what you want about immigration. There's one thing we know that's worked incredibly well, is the opportunity for dreamers to go to work, serve in the military, pay taxes, make a living, grow families in the only country they've ever called home. But of course, the administration wanted to shut that down. We took them to court, and we stopped that from happening. We saved the DACA program. And you know, those are just a couple of examples of the work we've had to do in this space. We had to sue to stop the family separation policy down on the border. We successfully stopped that. But unfortunately, you know, we know the effect this has on communities. We received so much support from our colleges and universities who joined in signing amicus briefs on all those litigations because they know the importance of standing up for the values of diversity and inclusivity, for standing up against racism and prejudice, and for fundamentally standing up for our Constitution, which actually requires us to apply and afford equal treatment under the law. So I am spending a lot of time defending civil rights, standing up for our Constitution, and I think it's been so powerful for people to come together. In the wake of incidents like Charlottesville, for people to come together and say, we're not going to accept that here. It's just not how it's going to be. We can have disagreements. We're a democracy. We can debate all sides of issues, but we can't abide or allow bigotry or prejudice or discrimination. And that's where we need to continue to stay strong. And absent leadership right now from DC, and in fact in the wake of efforts to further foment and divide, there's a game to that, people, right? It's so wonderful if you create chaos and you create division and you create animosity, because it allows those at the top to do whatever the hell they want. So just stay strong and stand by American values. And this is not a partisan comment, this is a comment I'm making as an American. And that's unfortunately where we need to continue to be. But I'm so heartened to see people come forward, you know, and stand by in solidarity, you know, with one another and stand up for one another. And I just think that's where we need to continue to be. And please come to my office and discuss. Okay, anybody got anything else? You ready to go? Yeah.
So I know mentioned with the gun violence and you mentioned that, you know, suicide rates are up, but most of it, like, is veterans. And it's because they don't get the medical attention they need. What's your, I guess, your take on that?
I think it's a shame. You know, I think, I think it is terrible what we've done in not treating veterans and service members well in this country. You know, I talked to a lot of people who become addicted to opioids and would be opioids that they got through the VA. And now, because, you know, marijuana is legalized, and that's really an alternative, you know, to opioids for pain relief, the VA, of course, doesn't cover that. And so, you know, there are things that get in the way, and that's just one small example. But, you know, I feel like we just have not done what we need to do as a country when it comes to standing by veterans and service members, especially around issues of mental health, PTSD, the nature of what people sort of see and experience right now in today's modern warfare is really something, and we just need to do more. Now, Massachusetts actually has a pretty good record. I mean, we are the state that's known for providing the most resources to the more than 400,000 veterans that live in our state. But I think we should be doing, you know, looking for ways to do more. One of the things that really ticks me off about the for-profit colleges is they specifically target service members and veterans because they want, of course, access to that GI Bill money. I have in my office, I set up for the first time, a veteran service coordinator. Anybody who has any complaint, who files a complaint with my office, first off will be identified as a veteran or service member, if they wish to disclose that. You could be coming in because you're complaining about your, you know, insurance, sorry, Bob.
or, you know, some bank or whatever, you know, but if you're a veteran, I want to know that. And then we also have this whole unit within our office that is assigned to address and be a liaison for veterans and service members. So think of us, you know, as a resource. Did you serve?
I did.
Yeah, we're just,
I was
were you?
in the Army.
oh, I was born in Bethesda. Well, good for you. Thank you. What are you studying here?
Criminal justice.
Criminal justice. All right. You guys- All right, that's great. So I want to ask you, Professor, how many students were forced to come here today? But thank you for humoring me with what seems to be a big groan even if you were forced to come here. I appreciate that. But thank you for your time. I want to say I am a huge fan of community colleges. I think that in today's economy, this is where it's at, folks. I spent a lot of time dealing with four-year liberal arts institutions where people are graduating with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt that they can never repay. And I think you guys are really smart to make the most of everything you've got here. Take advantage of HCC's great track record when it comes to matriculation at other colleges and universities. And also know that I think one thing we've got to do as a state is find ways to, and I know that Jeff is working on this, you know, expand the workforce out here. So you have my support. I really appreciate that you guys, nothing was handed to you. And I think more than anything in life right now is, you know, I have such a respect for those who work hard. Ultimately, you know, you're going to go wherever your hard work takes you. And yes, there are barriers and things that get in your way, but it may not seem like an advantage that you've had barriers and obstacles, but in time it becomes an advantage, and just don't lose sight of that. So thank you for what you do.
So, first of all, I'd like to thank Attorney General Maura Healey for coming today. It was an honor to have you here and able to ask you questions that most Americans and most residents of Massachusetts want to hear. They want answers to these questions. And if I may add, if you come here one more time, word will get out that our criminal justice program is the best. So I thank you for coming, and I don't know about
Thank you, everybody, for coming, and thank you so much to Healey for not just being an Attorney General, but actively pursuing the issues that you know are affecting our communities most and hurting our residents most, and being able to take that corrective action. So we're very grateful for your leadership in the state, and thank you so much for making the trip out here to Western Massachusetts. Thank you.